This man is an American soldier who returned home after the Vietnam War. He had faced extremely brave Vietnamese soldiers on the battlefield, and because of that, his mind was deeply affected by everything he experienced. But when he finally returned home, he was harassed and brutally mistreated by the very police officers of his own country. Those were people who had never stepped foot in Vietnam. They could never understand how terrifying the scars left behind by war truly were. Facing these abusive officers who used their power against him, what will Rambo do to escape this unfair treatment? Let us find out together in this movie. At the beginning of the movie, former soldier John Rambo, after leaving the military, travels to a small countryside area to look for an old friend. He even takes out an old photo of himself with his teammates back in Vietnam. But the woman tells him that his friend has passed away, losing his life to cancer caused by Agent Orange, the chemical that was dropped during the Vietnam War. After hearing the news, Rambo feels completely alone because it seems like he is the only one left in this world. All of his close brothers from the battlefield are already gone. After that, he continues walking toward a nearby town. On the other side, Will is an extremely arrogant sheriff. The moment he sees Rambo, he immediately dislikes him. This man pretends to be kind by offering Rambo a ride, but in reality, he only wants to kick him out of his town. Because he simply does not like returning soldiers like him. Will drops the young man off on an empty road and drives away. However, things do not end there. Rambo is extremely hungry, so he decides to return to town to get himself a proper meal. But trouble refuses to leave him alone. The sheriff turns his car around again and continues making things difficult for him. He asks for Rambo's identification and orders him to put both hands on the vehicle for a search. Seeing that the other man has a gun, Rambo does not want to create unnecessary trouble. The sheriff finds a military knife on Rambo. Of course, after that, he immediately arrests Rambo and takes him back to the police station. As soon as he arrives, he is welcomed by a violent police officer who is already holding a baton, ready to threaten him. It seems like these officers with nothing better to do enjoy causing problems for innocent people. Rambo has done nothing wrong, yet he is arrested for no real reason. When he sees the metal bars on the window, the horrifying memories from the Vietnam battlefield suddenly come rushing back. After the officers see his military ID, they force him to give his fingerprints and admit to a crime he never committed. I'll break your arm if you don't put your hand down, understand? Sometimes, even staying out of trouble still brings trouble to your door. The sheriff announces that Rambo will spend 90 days in jail and pay a $250 fine, simply because he refused to follow the sheriff's attitude. If you enter my town, you live by my rules. Right after that, the sheriff orders his men to spray Rambo with a high-pressure water hose. When Rambo takes off his shirt, the terrifying scars covering his body are revealed. Surviving Vietnam with scars was already lucky because many others never made it back home. The officer hits Rambo once again, but they do not stop there. They continue spraying water directly at him while the other officers outside laugh and enjoy watching. After that, they suddenly act kind in a strange way by bringing a razor to clean up Rambo's appearance. But if he refuses to cooperate, you already know what might happen next. These aggressive actions directly trigger Rambo as painful memories from the past. The officers take advantage of his unstable mental state while trying to shave him. But the man holding the razor looks more like he wants to hurt him rather than help him shave. At that moment, Rambo finally loses control. He cannot endure it anymore. Rambo kicks away the officer holding the razor. Then he goes after the other cruel officers. That's enough. I've been holding back for too long. These officers are used to living comfortably and abusing their power. So how could they possibly be a match for a real combat veteran like Rambo? In just a short time, every single one of them is taken down by him. After that, Rambo steals a vehicle and escapes, while the police immediately jump into their cars and chase after him. But these guys are still far from his level. Rambo drives with incredible skill, even drifting through difficult roads like a professional racer. The sheriff still refuses to let this go. He aggressively drives after Rambo, ignoring every dangerous road condition. He thinks catching this difficult young man will be an easy job, but once they reach the rough mountain roads, his oversized police car completely flips over. He continues sending more police vehicles after him, determined to capture Rambo no matter what. After driving for a long distance, Rambo finally abandons the vehicle and escapes into the mountain forest. However, Sheriff Will is furious and shouts that he will get revenge for this humiliation. Rambo completely ignores him. He quickly runs toward an abandoned truck to collect useful supplies. He puts on extra clothing to keep his body warm. Rambo knows that very soon, even more police officers will come after him. At this moment, Will is still extremely confident. He sends police dogs to track Rambo's scent. A group of officers equipped with heavy weapons prepare for action. Above them, A helicopter also provides support from the sky. They believe that with such a powerful force, catching any target will be simple. But the sheriff has no idea that this foolish decision will become something he regrets forever. Rambo runs toward a dangerous cliff. Unfortunately, he realizes that there is no path forward anymore. Outside, the police have already discovered Rambo's footprints. When there is no other choice, Rambo decides to take the risk and climb down the cliff. Just when it seems like he has finally escaped the chase, things are not that simple. The police helicopter arrives and discovers Rambo trapped on the side of the cliff. Instead of bringing him back to the station, the officer decides to shoot and kill Rambo. But his aim is terrible, and he cannot hit the target at all. The pilot tells the officer that Rambo is already trapped there, and sooner or later they will capture him. But this man stubbornly wants to kill Rambo, just to protect his own pride. Knowing that if he does not jump, he will eventually be shot, Rambo sees the river below and decides to take the ultimate risk by throwing himself down. Luckily, several tree branches break his fall. He survives, but his arm is badly injured with a deep wound. The old officer still refuses to give up his revenge and orders the helicopter closer, continuing to fire at Rambo. 1 or 2 shots might be something he can tolerate, but constantly shooting at him is just too disrespectful. You keep missing every shot, yet you still want to continue? Come on, old man. At this moment, Rambo is truly angry. He picks up a large rock and uses all his strength to throw it at the helicopter windshield. The aircraft loses control, causing the old officer to fall from the helicopter. And just like that, his revenge plan comes to an end. Rambo is smart enough to collect the officer's weapon for protection. A short time later, the sheriff and his men arrive at the scene. Seeing his teammate gone, the sheriff becomes extremely emotional. Meanwhile, after Rambo finishes treating his wound, he walks out and tries to make peace with the police. I don't want to hurt anyone. That man fell because of an accident. It wasn't he because of me. But the police above have no interest in listening to his explanation. They have superior weapons and numbers, believing that because they hold authority, they are the ones who decide everything. After that, the sheriff continues gathering even more resources to hunt Rambo down. When the higher authorities hear about this, they immediately disagree and explain that Rambo is an American war hero who served in Vietnam and even received military honors from the government. The nearby officers are shocked after hearing this. They all freeze, unable to believe what they just heard, because they know that anyone who fought in Vietnam and still managed to survive is definitely not an ordinary person. Ignoring all the warnings from his superiors, the sheriff has already become obsessed. He swears that he will not stop until he captures Rambo. On the other side, Rambo has already sharpened wooden sticks and prepared traps. He is about to show these overconfident officers what real combat actually looks like. As soon as the police officers get closer to Rambo's location, they see a shadowy figure moving in front of them. The old officer leading the group immediately releases 2 hunting dogs to attack. But all they hear in response are 2 gunshots. Before he can even understand what happened, the officer is shot in the leg. The other police officers behind him quickly drop to the ground and start firing back at Rambo. But honestly, these guys are just shooting at empty space. How can they hit the main character when they cannot even see him? These officers are only used to shooting at targets during training. Now they are facing a real combat veteran who survived the Vietnam battlefield and mastered survival skills in the jungle. The difference between them is simply too big. Luckily, Rambo decides to spare them. He gives the officers time to treat the old man's injury because he wants them to understand the danger and leave before things get worse. After fighting in Vietnam, Rambo knows exactly how to use the forest as his advantage. He applies the combat experience he learned on the battlefield. As soon as one officer walks past him, Rambo attacks his leg with a knife. The man falls down and screams in pain. The others hear the desperate screams and quickly call each other for backup. One officer slowly approaches the area, but the living bush suddenly jumps down and takes him out. Another officer also screams loudly, begging his teammates for help. The sheriff rushes over and fires a shot at Rambo, but he almost hits his own teammate behind him instead. Nearby, another officer is running through the forest when a trap suddenly pierces his leg. He also starts screaming for help. The sheriff keeps shouting while searching for his missing men. Then he sees one of his officers tied up to a tree, looking extremely painful. He walks over to save him, but suddenly the living bush appears and places a knife against his neck. Rambo begins to speak. I could have taken all of you down, but I wanted to show you what a soldier who fought in Vietnam is capable of. Do you know what a living bush means? Have you ever heard about real jungle combat skills? I was there, and I learned these skills. And now you better leave. If you come after me again, you will face the consequences. Rambo spares his life. After this incident, a police force hunting one man ends up being defeated by that same person, shocking the entire country. Soon after, the National Guard is sent to the town. They wonder who this man really is and how he managed to cause so much trouble for the police. Even after suffering a major defeat, the sheriff still refuses to give up. At this moment, a military colonel named Troutman arrives. He was Rambo's former commander during the Vietnam War. Colonel Troutman says he wants to take Rambo away. He sees him almost like his own son. But the hot-headed sheriff immediately refuses and gets angry. He says he will capture Rambo and take him down himself. After hearing this, the colonel can only smile at the sheriff as confidence. He says, "I'm not here to protect you from Rambo. I'm here to protect Rambo from you." The colonel continues, "You have no idea who you are dealing with. Do you know how dangerous mines and traps on the battlefield can be? Some explosives are hidden so carefully that they are almost impossible to detect. You might think you successfully disarmed one, but just one wrong move could trigger an explosion. Even after surviving that, you could walk away, go to a river to wash your hands, and still step on another hidden mine." After that, the police and the colonel arrive at the command camp. Troutman advises Rambo to surrender, promising that he will help protect him. But this tough soldier refuses to surrender to the police. Maybe after everything he experienced on the battlefield, Rambo has developed the mindset that once he enters a fight, he will never give up easily. Because of his phone call, the sheriff manages to locate Rambo's south hiding place. He prepares a large number of police officers and National Guard members to surround and capture him. Just as he promised, not long after, around 200 heavily armed officers move toward the location where Rambo is hiding. Meanwhile, as Rambo is moving to a new location, a young boy who is out hunting suddenly discovers him. Rambo quickly takes the boy down and throws his gun away, showing that he has no intention of hurting the kid. But the young boy, who has never experienced anything like this before, immediately panics and calls for his father. Because of that, Rambo's location is discovered. With nowhere else to go, Rambo decides to return to the mine and defend himself there. The police do not waste any time. The moment they find him, they immediately open fire. What they want now is to bury this entire situation and make it disappear. Whether Rambo survives or not no longer matters to them. These inexperienced officers outside are holding M16 rifles and firing nonstop at Rambo. But taking down a highly trained soldier like him is definitely not that simple. Rambo is the type of person who says he does not want to fight, but his survival skills are on another level. He immediately responds with extremely accurate shots. Every time Rambo appears, he only fires a few rounds before quickly changing to another position. When the police see how precise his attacks are, almost hitting every target perfectly, they can only stay down and protect themselves. Some of them are even so scared that they freeze in place. The officers outside want to finish the mission quickly and go home, so they decide to fire a rocket directly into the cave. Rambo senses a danger and quickly moves away before the explosion takes him out. A short time later, Sheriff will arrive with Colonel Troutman by helicopter. But seeing the destroyed area makes the sheriff extremely angry. He orders his men to dig through the entire mountain if necessary to find Rambo's body. If they cannot find him, they might as well forget about having an easy future in this job. The sheriff wants to personally capture Rambo and make him pay. Colonel Troutman knows exactly how capable Rambo really is, so he simply smiles confidently and leaves without saying anything. Meanwhile, the sheriff keeps complaining because he still has not defeated Rambo. At the same time, deep inside the dark mine, Rambo is still alive. He tears a piece of cloth from his shirt and lights it on fire, trying to search for anything useful for survival. After finding an old container of leftover fuel, he tears his shirt into several smaller pieces and soaks them, creating a simple homemade torch. The next important thing he needs to do is find where the airflow is coming from. But the tunnel is extremely slippery, causing him to fall into a pool of water. His wound opens again, and the painful feeling immediately returns. However, this only makes Rambo stronger. Because of his experience fighting in Vietnam, moving through a dark and narrow underground tunnel does not make him panic. Standing between life and death, he has no other choice except to keep moving forward. However, this wet environment is also the home of many rats. This time, Rambo falls directly into their territory. The hungry rats immediately rush toward him. But these little guys are still far from being able to stop Rambo. After getting through this difficult path, he wraps another piece of cloth around himself and keeps going. With unstoppable determination, luck finally smiles at Rambo as he manages to crawl out of that dark underground tunnel. But outside, there are still too many police officers around. He has no choice but to return to the tunnel and hide a little longer. By the end of the day, the police finally become tired and give up the search. Rambo waits for the perfect moment and jumps onto the last military truck. Using his knife, he quickly takes control of the driver. After traveling for a short distance, Rambo directly kicks the young man out of the vehicle. The driver quickly reports to the police that Rambo is still alive. This news makes the sheriff extremely excited. He immediately orders the closest police car to chase after the military truck. But the sheriff has seriously underestimated that military vehicle. As soon as the police car gets close, the officers start pulling the trigger and opening fire. Luckily, the military truck is equipped with bulletproof glass, so these officers keep shooting but cannot even touch Rambo. Rambo does not have much to offer, except a little challenge to test whose vehicle is stronger. Let us see which one is tougher, your car or mine. After saying that, he immediately steps on the gas and charges straight forward. And the result is that the police car flips over, lying on the road with smoke coming out everywhere. However, escaping one problem only leads to another. The police have already set up a roadblock on the other side of the bridge. But these guys are still underestimating the anger of a trained soldier. Rambo increases his speed and smashes straight through the police cars blocking the road. The officers can only continue firing and watch him disappear. That night, Rambo enters deep inside the town. He crashes into a nearby gas station. After that, he removes the M60 machine gun from the back of the truck. He throws a flame and burns the entire vehicle. The gasoline leaking onto the ground quickly creates a massive explosion. The loud blast and intense heat wake up the peaceful town. Who could possibly imagine that all of this destruction was caused by just one man? The sheriff immediately sends the entire police department to help evacuate and rescue the people. But the continuous explosions cause the officers to run away in panic. The sheriff knows that sooner or later, Rambo will come looking for him to end everything, so he loads his weapon and prepares to face him. The colonel sincerely advises him to let go of this personal conflict, but the sheriff completely ignores his advice. Because until now, Rambo is the first person who has ever challenged his authority. To him, something like this can never be allowed to happen again. A short time later, Rambo arrives outside the police station. The first thing he does is walk around and carefully observe everything. All of the police officers have been sent to handle the fire at the gas station, so now only the arrogant sheriff remains inside the building. Rambo fires his weapon and destroys the electrical system, causing all the lights to go out. The sheriff freezes, completely confused about what is happening. Down below, Rambo sees a gun shop nearby, so he fires another round and destroys the store's lighting system. Taking advantage of the moment while the sheriff is still shocked, Rambo sneaks inside and throws boxes of ammunition and weapons all over the floor. Then he carefully picks up some gunpowder and creates a fuse. After finishing his preparation, he walks outside and fires at the fuse. The sound of continuous gunfire immediately attracts the sheriff's attention. Very quickly, the building cannot withstand the destruction and explodes completely. Meanwhile, Rambo has already hidden himself in a corner, carefully watching everything. He sees the sheriff's head appearing on the rooftop. In the darkness, Rambo moves across the floor like a ghost. Before the sheriff can even react, Rambo shoots him in the leg. He fires a powerful burst of bullets from underneath the floor. Losing his balance, the sheriff falls down from above. Even after everything, he continues challenging Rambo, telling him to finish the job. Rambo is about to use the M60 to end everything, but suddenly Colonel Troutman appears and tells him to stop. Troutman says that he will protect him and arrange a helicopter to take Rambo somewhere else. While they are still talking, a gunshot suddenly comes flying inside. The colonel immediately signals the police officers to stop shooting. "Look around, Rambo. You have destroyed half of the town." Rambo responds with anger, saying that this is his own personal war. "There are people out there who will never leave soldiers like him alone. When I came back to my own country, I saw those people everywhere. They called me a killer. If only they had been on the battlefield in Vietnam, they would understand what a living nightmare really looks like." He says that sometimes he wishes he could return to the battlefield in Vietnam, holding a weapon and fighting beside his brothers again, driving million-dollar military vehicles. But after coming back to America, he cannot even find a normal job. The world he returned to feels completely unfair. Then Rambo tells the colonel about the death of his best friend, Danforth. His friend was approached by a young boy offering to shine his shoes, but the box that boy carried suddenly exploded right in front of him. Pieces of his friend were left on Rambo. That horrifying memory has haunted him for the past 7 years. He has never been able to talk about this pain with anyone until this moment. Troutman never realized that his soldier had carried so much suffering inside for all these years. He hugs Rambo tightly, trying to tell him that everything is finally over. The colonel takes Rambo away from all this chaos, giving him a chance to start a new life where he no longer has to face rejection and discrimination. And that is the end of the movie. The American soldiers who fought in the Vietnam War were sent into a conflict where many of them carried deep emotional wounds long after returning home. As for Rambo, everything he experienced pushed him close to a complete mental breakdown. On the other hand, he also gained incredible survival skills and combat tactics from his time on the battlefield. And that brings this movie recap to an end. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. This man was betrayed by his own superior and ended up falling into the hands of the Soviet army. The first thing he had to face was being thrown into a mud pit nearly 10 feet deep, filled with giant Asian leeches. After feeding on his blood, each one became swollen and huge. After that, he was repeatedly beaten in the face with batons and even brutally tortured with electric shocks every night. Even more devastating, the woman he loved the most was also killed. So what will he do to escape from his enemies when they are armed with guns and powerful weapons? To find his way back and take revenge for himself and the woman he loved, let us dive into this movie together. Rambo is a retired war veteran. Previously, he was arrested after causing chaos at a police station. Now, he has become a prisoner and is forced to perform hard labor in a stone quarry. One day, the colonel comes to meet Rambo once again and offers him a secret search and rescue mission. If he successfully completes this mission, he may even receive a pardon and be released early. After hearing this, Rambo immediately agrees to his request, not for any other reason, but because he trusts the colonel who once fought side by side with him on the battlefield. Soon, Rambo is taken to an American military base in Thailand, where he meets the commander in charge. The commander tells Rambo that his mission this time is to search for missing prisoners of war in Vietnam. However, he is only allowed to take photos to confirm the situation and is not permitted to engage in combat. Once he confirms the location of the prisoners, the colonel will send his team in to carry out the rescue operation. After making some simple preparations with his equipment, Rambo boards a helicopter and officially begins his mission. This time, his mission is extremely difficult. Within only 36 hours, he must complete everything infiltrating the target area, taking photographic evidence, and safely escaping. And there, besides a local contact named Ko Bao who will support him, he has absolutely no backup forces behind him. This mission is truly Rambo's one-man war. However, just as he reaches the drop zone, an unexpected accident occurs. When Rambo prepares to jump from the aircraft, a cable gets caught around his waist, leaving him hanging in midair. Under the force of the powerful wind, his life could be in danger at any moment. In this critical situation, Rambo has no choice but to use his knife to cut the rope. After that, he throws away all the heavy equipment attached to him, allowing him to escape the dangerous situation. He then parachutes down and moves deep into the tropical jungle. Rambo crosses mountains, rivers, and pushes through the dense forest. His most urgent mission now is to quickly find Ko Bao, the person who will assist him here. Finally, near a large rock, he finds Ko Bao holding a gun in her hands. But what Rambo never expected was that the person responsible for helping him would actually be a young woman. Under Ko Bao's guidance, Rambo arrives at an abandoned dock. She takes out a stack of money and gives it to the group of men in front of them. After a simple exchange, the two board the boat and continue their journey. Eventually, as night begins to fall, they finally approach the Vietnamese military base. However, because Rambo was forced to throw away all of his equipment and camera during the parachute jump, he now has no choice but to personally infiltrate the camp and investigate the real situation of the prisoners of war. Don't tell me you're planning to go in there. I thought you were only here to take pictures. What about your orders? Forget the orders. After saying that, Rambo picks up his bow and grabs his knife. Alone, he begins moving toward the enemy camp. First, Rambo uses his knife to cut through the barbed wire fence and quietly sneaks inside. But unexpectedly, this place is heavily guarded, with soldiers stationed everywhere. Because of that, Rambo can only hide in the darkness and carefully observe the situation. Finally, near a small stream, he discovers a hidden area where a group of prisoners of war are being held. Just as Rambo is preparing to find a way to rescue everyone, he suddenly notices a soldier tied up and hanging from a pole nearby. Without hesitation, Rambo immediately approaches and uses his knife to cut the ropes, preparing to take the prisoner away from this place. But during their escape, they accidentally run into a group of patrolling soldiers. To avoid alerting the enemy, Rambo immediately throws his knife and takes one of them down. After that, he quickly pulls out his bow, eliminates another soldier, and leads the prisoner away from the dangerous area. However, Ko Bao, who is hiding outside, is unexpectedly discovered by another soldier. At that critical moment, Rambo fires an arrow, hitting the enemy and pinning him against a tree. In the end, all three of them successfully escape from the base without facing any further danger. The next morning, the bodies of the three soldiers are discovered. The commander immediately orders his forces to gather and begins searching for the person who entered the jungle. Meanwhile, Rambo and the others return to the small river. They board the same boat from earlier and quickly leave the area. Not long after, the pursuing forces discover traces of Rambo's group. They immediately send out patrol boats and begin chasing him down along the river. When the pirates saw the military patrol boat chasing them from behind, they immediately turned against Rambo and pointed their guns directly at his head. They did not want to make enemies with the local military, but they had no idea that the man standing in front of them was even more dangerous than the people chasing them. While the pirates were distracted, Rambo quickly pulled out 2 hidden knives from his belt and instantly took one of them down. After that, he grabbed a gun and fired 5 consecutive shots, eliminating all the pirates in front of him. At this moment, the patrol boat behind them was getting closer and began firing a storm of bullets at the small boat. Seeing this, Rambo quickly told Ko Bao and the rescued prisoner to jump into the river. Meanwhile, he waited for the perfect moment, pulled out a bazooka hidden inside the boat, and fired directly at the pursuing patrol boat, destroying it completely. Just as Rambo was about to jump off the boat, the last remaining pirate suddenly wrapped a rope around his neck. In that dangerous moment, Rambo pulled out his knife, defeated the pirate, and successfully escaped the pursuit. After rescuing the prisoner, Rambo worried about Ko Bao's safety, so he asked her to leave first. He then took the rescued prisoner to the planned extraction point to continue the rescue mission. However, when the 2 of them reached a rice field, they were unexpectedly discovered by the soldiers searching for them. Soon after, the soldiers quickly launched an attack against Rambo and the prisoner. Fortunately, the colonel arrived just in time and immediately started an aerial counterattack. With the colonel's support, Rambo and the rescued prisoner finally reached the extraction point safely. After that, the colonel contacted the base commander and reported that Rambo had successfully rescued a prisoner of war, meaning they could now begin the rescue operation immediately. However, after hearing this news, the commander became extremely angry. He ordered everyone to leave the room, then grabbed the radio and shouted, "I want you to abort the mission immediately. I repeat, this is an order." After receiving the command, the pilot prepared to leave the area. But the colonel could not bring himself to abandon Rambo, so he ignored the order and prepared to rush in to save him. However, he was immediately stopped by another soldier pointing a gun at him. Powerless to do anything, he could only watch as Rambo desperately shouted from below. Watching the helicopter fly further and further away, Rambo had no choice but to lower the weapon in his hands. Soon after, a large group of soldiers quickly surrounded them and brought Rambo and the prisoner back to the base. They threw Rambo into a mud pit and waited for the Soviet soldiers to arrive and interrogate him. Before long, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Podovsky stepped down from a helicopter. He ordered his men to remove the leeches from Rambo's body, clean him up, and take him into the interrogation room. He wanted Rambo to contact the base and promised that he would never continue this mission again. After hearing his demand, Rambo only gave him a cold response. But the base that Rambo had risked his life to protect was hiding an even darker truth. The colonel was furious that the commander had abandoned the rescue mission. So after returning to the base, the 2 of them got into a heated argument. At that moment, the commander finally revealed his true plan. It turned out that he sent Rambo to search for prisoners only as a public relations move for the media. He never intended to spend a large amount of money rescuing the people still trapped there. After hearing this, the colonel was completely outraged. He said those prisoners were all people who had sacrificed for their country, and they should never be treated this way. Especially an experienced warrior like Rambo, the colonel firmly believed that he would definitely survive and find a way back. But after hearing this, the commander only looked at him with a cold and dismissive expression. Meanwhile, Rambo had been strapped into an electric torture device by Podovsky. But even though the electric shocks made his entire body tremble, he still refused to surrender. After that, Podovsky played a recording of an intercepted call from the American pilot and revealed the truth that the base had already abandoned the rescue mission. But Rambo remained strong and refused to give up. Seeing that he would not cooperate, Podovsky brought out the remaining prisoner and threatened to hurt him. With no other choice, Rambo finally agreed to his demand and called the American military base. However, the very next moment, he suddenly used the radio equipment to attack the soldier beside him. At the same time, Ko Bao, who had secretly been hiding nearby for a long time, opened fire to support him. It turned out that ever since Rambo was captured and taken back to the base, she had secretly followed and watched everything that happened. After that, with Ko Bao's help, the 2 of them worked together to escape the enemy's encirclement and leave the camp. They continued running for a long distance. Finally, when morning arrived, they reached a small river. Rambo was extremely grateful to Ko Bao for saving his life. He promised that after completing the mission, he would take her back to America with him. After hearing those words, Ko Bao was filled with happiness. She hugged Rambo tightly, and the 2 shared a kiss. But just after she walked a few steps away, she was suddenly shot by the pursuing soldiers. Rambo immediately fought back and took down the entire group of soldiers. However, when he turned around and saw Ko Bao lying in the water, she was already barely holding on. In the end, Ko Bao lay in Rambo's arms and said her final words. "Promise me you will never forget me." After that, she took her last breath. Seeing the woman he loved disappear right in front of him, this time Rambo was truly consumed by anger. After burying Ko Bao, Rambo removes her necklace and puts it around his own neck. After that, he begins planning his revenge deep inside the jungle. He pulls out his bow and arrow and takes down the commander standing in front of him because he was the one who took away the woman Rambo loved the most. But the soldiers behind him still continue chasing him. Because of that, Rambo has no choice but to continue fighting alone. He hides inside a tree hole and takes down the soldiers passing by. Then, he hides again on a tree branch and deals with the armed enemies approaching him. After that, he covers his entire body with mud, blending perfectly into the surrounding environment before suddenly launching his attack. In just a short amount of time, Rambo manages to defeat a large number of soldiers. After that, he escapes and hides inside a small village. Seeing a rooster and a pile of straw in front of him, Rambo suddenly comes up with a plan. He intentionally spreads the chicken's blood onto the reeds and lures the pursuing soldiers deeper into the bushes. But by the time they discover the dead chicken and realize what is happening, it is already too late. At this moment, Rambo has already climbed to a higher position and uses his homemade explosive arrow to blow up the entire reed area. But things are far from over. After that, Rambo uses his bow and arrow again to destroy a Soviet truck parked on the road. Then, he runs straight toward the waterfall area. But right at this moment, a helicopter flies over Rambo's head and drops explosives toward his location. Luckily, Rambo reacts extremely quickly and immediately jumps into the water beside him, allowing him to escape the danger. However, a soldier on the helicopter begins using a machine gun to continuously fire into the water. They control the helicopter and fly close to the lake surface to make sure Rambo has been eliminated. But suddenly, Rambo emerges from underwater and pulls the soldier down into the lake. After that, he jumps into the helicopter and fights against the man inside. During the struggle, Rambo finds the perfect opportunity and pushes him out of the helicopter, sending him falling straight down. Seeing that the situation is getting worse, the pilot immediately decides to jump out of the aircraft. Meanwhile, Rambo quickly takes control of the unstable helicopter and flies toward the enemy camp. He begins launching continuous attacks from above, causing the entire area to quickly become engulfed in flames. The explosion scenes in this part are truly satisfying and spectacular. After that, Rambo lands a helicopter near the cave where the prisoners of war are being held. With heavy fire support, he helps each prisoner get onto the helicopter one by one. But right at this moment, a Soviet soldier suddenly gets back up and shoots one of the prisoners. Seeing this, Rambo instantly becomes furious and fires back at him. However, their helicopter does not get far before Podovsky's aircraft catches up and starts attacking them relentlessly. At the most dangerous moment, Rambo's helicopter runs out of ammunition, leaving him with no choice but to focus on avoiding the attacks. But very quickly, the tail of his helicopter is hit by Podovsky, causing the entire aircraft to shake violently. Podovsky takes the opportunity and fires a missile. Smoke and flames immediately cover his entire field of vision. When he is finally able to see clearly again, Podovsky discovers that Rambo's helicopter has made an emergency landing in the lake. Believing that Rambo has definitely been eliminated, he quickly lowers his helicopter to check the situation. But at that exact moment, Rambo suddenly opens his eyes. Taking advantage of Podovsky's lowered guard, he immediately grabs the rocket launcher and fires directly at him. After a massive explosion, Podovsky and his helicopter disappear into the flames. After that, Rambo brings the prisoners back to the American military base. The first thing he does after stepping off the aircraft is grab his weapon and storm straight into the facility. He destroys all the high-tech equipment in front of him, then finds the commander with a face full of anger. Next, he pulls the knife from his waist, grabs the commander by the collar, and slams him down onto the table. Although the commander keeps explaining that he never wanted to abandon the rescue mission, at this moment, Rambo can no longer listen to any of his excuses. He drives his knife into the table and asks, "Do you know there are still many people out there? Do you know where they are? If you don't find them, I will come back for you." At the end of the movie, the colonel invites Rambo to return with him. However, Rambo refuses his offer. He cannot understand why he loves his country so much, yet time after time, he feels abandoned by the very same country he fought for. In reality, what these veterans want is very simple. They only hope that their country can love them the same way they once loved their country. The action movie First Blood Part 2 was released in 1985. Compared to the previous film, the combat atmosphere in this sequel becomes much more intense and exciting. Especially with the appearance of the female lead, the story of this powerful warrior gains a completely new emotional side. And the final line of the movie, "We just want our country to love us as much as we love it." This sentence also shows us the helplessness and bitterness hidden behind these heroes. Alright, that is the end of today's movie recap. If you enjoyed this video and want to support us, please leave a like and share it. Thank you so much for watching. See you again in the next videos. Bye-bye. After completing the POW rescue mission in Vietnam in the previous film, Rambo was left deeply scarred by the horrors of war. Hoping to find peace, he traveled to a Buddhist monastery in Thailand to heal both his mind and soul. His daily routine was simple. He spent most of his time repairing buildings around the temple. Whenever there was no work to do, he entered underground fighting matches. The interesting part was that every dollar he won was donated to support the monks. Unfortunately, that peaceful life didn't last very long. One day, Colonel Troutman unexpectedly arrived with representatives from the U.S. Embassy. Without wasting time on small talk, they got straight to the point. One of the embassy officials showed Rambo a photograph of a young boy wounded in the war in Afghanistan. He explained that the conflict between Soviet forces and Afghan resistance fighters had escalated into a brutal war. Countless innocent civilians were caught in the middle. Near the border, Soviet troops had imposed strict military control over several villages and completely cut them off from the outside world. To help the civilians and evaluate possible weapons support for the resistance, a highly skilled reconnaissance team was needed to investigate the situation. Colonel Troutman had volunteered for the mission. But this time, even he wasn't completely confident. Out of everyone he had ever fought beside, there was only one man he truly trusted. John Rambo. That was why he hoped Rambo would join his old brothers in arms for one more mission. After hearing the proposal, Rambo immediately refused. After everything that happened in the previous movie, he had lost faith in military leadership and promises that sounded too good to be true. Troutman understood exactly how he felt. He didn't try to pressure him. Instead, he quietly walked away. Without Rambo, the colonel had no choice but to continue the mission himself. Leading a small team, he entered Mujahideen-controlled territory. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't the main character in this movie. As a result, his team was ambushed by Soviet forces, and Troutman was captured alive. The following day, the embassy representative returned to see Rambo. He informed him that Colonel Troutman had been captured. At that very moment, he was being held prisoner by Soviet troops. If nobody acted quickly, they might only be able to pay their respects to him in memoriam. The moment Rambo heard the news, he volunteered to go to Afghanistan and rescue the colonel. Even though he no longer trusted the system, he couldn't abandon a man who had fought beside him through countless battles. The next day, Rambo arrived at a Mujahideen village in Afghanistan. There he met Musa, the man responsible for supplying and transporting weapons. Musa immediately provided him with equipment and helped him gear up for the mission ahead. Under Musa's guidance, the two traveled to a local resistance base. Everyone was busy preparing a rescue operation for Colonel Troutman. Among them was a former Soviet soldier who had defected and joined the Mujahideen. He briefed Rambo on the prison camp where Troutman was being held. According to him, the base wasn't impossible to infiltrate. It was simply protected by extremely heavy security. Guards were stationed everywhere, and surrounding the entire compound was a massive minefield. After hearing the details, Rambo casually suggested crossing straight through the mines. The others just stared at him. Sure, that sounds like a great plan when you're the main character. The rest of us only get one life. Nobody wants to play on hardcore mode. At that exact moment, two Soviet fighter jets suddenly appeared overhead. Without warning, they began bombing the area. Within seconds, the entire valley was engulfed in flames. The surprise attack caused devastating casualties among the Afghan villagers. Many people were forced to flee before they even understood what was happening. One mother tried to escape while carrying her child, but she was still caught in the gunfire. Young fighters grabbed their weapons and attempted to fight back. But against the overwhelming power of military aircraft, their efforts were hopeless. Witnessing the devastation firsthand, Rambo could no longer stand by and watch. He immediately grabbed a heavy machine gun and unleashed a storm of bullets into the sky. Then the impossible happened. One of the Soviet aircraft was shot down right in front of everyone. Seeing this, the Soviet commander completely lost his temper. He ordered his pilots to fly lower and wipe out the entire area. No survivors. No exceptions. But after combing through the region for quite some time, they found nothing but dust, smoke, and growing frustration. Eventually, the Soviet aircraft were forced to withdraw. After the battle, Rambo sat silently among the ruins. Looking at the destruction around him, his determination burned stronger than ever. No matter what happened, he was going to save Colonel Troutman. Meanwhile, an Afghan villager was preparing to escort the surviving civilians to safety near the border. He urged Rambo to come with them. After all, this wasn't his war. But Rambo refused. He thanked the man for his kindness and explained that he couldn't leave. He came here for Colonel Troutman, not just because he was his commanding officer. Troutman was a brother-in-arms who had stood beside him through countless bloody battles. That night, Rambo and Musa secretly infiltrated the Soviet military base. The two carefully made their way through a massive minefield. At one point, Musa nearly triggered a mine because of the pressure. Fortunately, Rambo reacted fast enough to stop him. Otherwise, Musa's screen time would have ended right there. Just then, a young boy carrying a rifle suddenly appeared. It turned out that his parents had been killed by Soviet forces. Now he wanted revenge. Concerned for the boy's safety, Rambo tried to talk him out of it. "Kid, revenge doesn't have to happen today. They say revenge is a dish best served later. Running in there right now is basically buying a one-way ticket." But the boy was determined. Reluctantly, Rambo allowed him to come along. The group quietly slipped past several Soviet patrols. Along the way, they planted multiple timed explosives around the compound. Everything was going smoothly until a dog suddenly started barking. The guards immediately fired flares into the sky to investigate. Luckily, Rambo quickly climbed onto a rooftop and stayed hidden. Moments later, he used a passing tank as cover, slipping underneath it before sneaking into the prison compound. Inside, he met an Afghan woman. With her help, Rambo quickly located the area where Colonel Troutman was being held. Taking advantage of the prison guard being fast asleep and probably dreaming about retirement, Rambo quietly stole the keys and unlocked the cell. But just as they were about to escape, a guard spotted them. Rambo instantly threw his knife and took the man down. Unfortunately, the guard managed to pull the trigger before collapsing. The gunshot echoed throughout the compound. Within seconds, alarms were raised. Soviet troops swarmed the area like angry hornets. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, Troutman told Rambo to retreat and regroup. At that exact moment, the timed explosives they had planted earlier began detonating. Within moments, the Soviet base was engulfed in flames. The entire compound descended into chaos. Rambo fought relentlessly while helping everyone escape. But during the firefight, the young boy was shot in the leg. Without hesitation, Rambo rushed to save him. Then a series of explosions erupted nearby, leaving Rambo wounded as well. Ignoring the pain, he kept fighting. He threw the boy over his shoulder and blasted a path out of the base. Outside, Musa was already waiting to help them escape safely. However, as the group retreated through an underground drainage tunnel, Soviet soldiers quickly caught up. Rambo ordered Musa and the boy to keep moving while he stayed behind to hold off the enemy. Without hesitation, he dove into the water to avoid the relentless barrage of gunfire. The moment the soldiers paused to reload, Rambo burst from the water and eliminated 3 of them in seconds. Right then, an Afghan fighter arrived on horseback to provide support. Unfortunately, he was critically wounded almost immediately by Soviet gunfire. Seeing this, Rambo grabbed a rocket launcher and fired back. The shot was so accurate it looked like the missile had its own GPS guidance system. The explosion turned a large section of the Soviet compound into an inferno. Using the chaos as cover, the group escaped on horseback. When the news reached Colonel Zazin, the Soviet commander, he became so furious his face practically changed colors like a traffic light. He immediately went to see Colonel Troutman and resumed torturing him. Afterward, Zazin coldly delivered his warning. "I don't know who that man is, but before sunrise, I'll capture him and send him to join you on the other side." Hearing that, Colonel Troutman calmly replied, "You don't need to go looking for him. He'll come looking for you. And when he does, you'll learn what a nightmare really looks like." Meanwhile, after escaping immediate danger, Rambo instructed Musa to take the boy away from the combat zone. As for himself, he planned to return alone and rescue his former commanding officer. At the same time, Soviet forces launched a large-scale manhunt for Rambo. What they didn't realize was that he had already circled back. Using the surrounding cliffs as cover, Rambo climbed the mountainside and secretly infiltrated the camp from behind. Inside the prison compound, Colonel Troutman was still being tortured. But Rambo had arrived. The moment one guard let his attention slip, Rambo silently took him out. Then he moved straight toward the prisoner-holding area. Just as another guard was preparing to continue beating Troutman, Rambo appeared at exactly the right moment. He grabbed a nearby stick and started swinging it like he was pounding grain at harvest season. After freeing Troutman, the two armed themselves and began opening other prison cells to release the remaining captives. At that exact moment, the helicopters sent out to search for Rambo returned to base. Unfortunately for the Soviets, they came back empty-handed. When Colonel Zazen returned to inspect the prison compound, all he found were empty cells. Instantly, he knew something had gone terribly wrong. The moment he turned around, he saw Rambo and the escaping prisoners climbing aboard a helicopter. Zazen looked like his blood pressure had just reached critical levels. Without hesitation, he grabbed a weapon and opened fire on the helicopter. Under such intense close-range fire, the aircraft didn't last long. The rotor blades caught fire, and thick black smoke poured from the tail. With no other option, Rambo was forced to make an emergency landing in a rocky mountain region. Everyone barely managed to get clear before the helicopter exploded behind them. Rambo immediately ordered the others to move downhill. Meanwhile, he and Colonel Troutman stayed behind to provide cover. On the other side, determined to capture Rambo alive, Zazen deployed 2 attack helicopters to sweep the entire area. Soon, Rambo spotted one of the aircraft flying dangerously close to a cliff. Without hesitation, he raised his bow and fired. The shot was so absurdly accurate that it almost felt illegal. Seconds later, the helicopter exploded in midair. The downside was that Rambo had just revealed his own position. Zazen immediately turned his aircraft toward the mountainside and unleashed a barrage of bombs. Fortunately, Colonel Troutman spotted a nearby cave and quickly called Rambo inside. Seeing his target disappear into the cave, Zazen deployed troops to hunt him down. But no matter how advanced their night vision gear was, they still had one major problem. They were fighting Rambo on his home turf. One by one, Soviet soldiers vanished into the darkness. When Zazen radioed his men for a situation report, he was met with complete silence because every single one of them had already been eliminated. A few moments later, Rambo picked up a radio and answered for them. "You want to come down here and join your men?" The moment Zazen heard that voice, he realized the situation had gone from bad to worse. He immediately decided to land. After clearing out the remaining soldiers inside the cave, Rambo grabbed a rope and climbed back to the surface. But the second he poked his head out of the cave entrance, an enemy soldier ambushed him. Neither man was willing to back down. The two immediately locked into a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Unfortunately, Rambo was already wounded and running on fumes. As a result, he quickly found himself at a disadvantage. Just when death seemed unavoidable, Rambo noticed a grenade attached to the soldier's gear. Without wasting a second, he pulled the safety pin. Then he delivered a powerful kick. The soldier lost his balance and plunged straight back into the cave. A few seconds later, a massive explosion echoed through the mountains. And just like that, the fight ended in a way where nobody really wanted to be declared the winner. Just when Rambo and Colonel Troutman thought they had finally survived the worst of it, another problem appeared. Out of nowhere, Soviet tanks, armored vehicles, and attack helicopters rolled into the area. Within moments, the two men found themselves surrounded from every direction. Colonel Zazen demanded their surrender. To make sure his message was clear, he ordered his troops to keep firing warning shots nonstop. Looking at the situation, peaceful negotiations were no longer an option. There was only one path left: fight to the very end. With full main character energy activated, Rambo immediately blew up a Soviet military truck. And with that, the final battle officially began. The Soviet firepower was so overwhelming it felt like someone had cranked the difficulty setting to maximum. Rambo and Colonel Troutman were forced to retreat into a nearby trench for cover. But both men understood something important. This was also the end of the road. Then suddenly, the Soviet attack stopped. Rambo had absolutely no idea what was happening. He cautiously raised his head to check the battlefield. That's when he saw them. The Afghan Mujahideen had arrived as reinforcements. Unfortunately, their arrival didn't completely turn the tide. The Soviet military still held a massive advantage in firepower. Tanks, armored vehicles, and helicopter gunships continued tearing across the battlefield. Under that relentless assault, the Afghan fighters suffered heavy casualties. Even Colonel Troutman was wounded during the fighting. But there was one major problem for the Soviets. Rambo was still standing. And historically, that's usually bad news for whoever happens to be on the other side. Without hesitation, Rambo mounted a horse and charged straight into battle. He stormed forward like a force of nature, throwing the Soviet armored formation into complete chaos. But his actions immediately caught Colonel Zazen's attention. The Soviet commander ordered every available weapon aimed directly at Rambo. Caught between tanks, armored vehicles, and enough guns to start a small war, Rambo knew standing still wasn't an option. So he did something only Rambo would think of. He threw a Molotov cocktail at an enemy tank. The vehicle exploded instantly. Using the confusion to his advantage, Rambo eliminated nearby soldiers before jumping onto another tank. And that's when the final boss battle truly began. On one side stood Colonel Zazen inside an armed helicopter. On the other stood Rambo driving a tank. Just hearing that setup tells you exactly where the movie's budget went. Rambo drove the tank forward at full speed, dodging incoming fire while charging directly into battle. The entire battlefield was covered in smoke, fire, and explosions. Finally, he lined up the shot. Rambo pulled the trigger. The deciding round was fired. In the very next moment, Zazen's helicopter and Rambo's tank collided head-on. A massive explosion shook the entire battlefield. If this had been literally any other character, the movie would have ended right there. But this is Rambo. A few seconds later, through the thick black smoke, he calmly walked out of the wreckage, almost completely unharmed. That's legendary main character armor at its finest. Unfortunately for Colonel Zazen, he didn't have the same perk unlocked. With his death, the final battle officially came to an end. Victory belonged to Rambo and the Afghan resistance fighters. After everything was over, the Afghan people asked Rambo to stay. To them, he was a hero who had saved countless lives. But Rambo declined. Maybe he understood that he didn't truly belong anywhere. Or maybe the writers already had plans for another sequel. Either way, he chose to leave. In the end, Rambo and Colonel Troutman drove away from Afghanistan, bringing their explosive adventure to a close. Thank you all for watching the movie recap. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and support the channel. And we'll see you next time for another chapter in the Rambo series. Time flies faster than a truck with no brakes rolling downhill. Before you know it, another 6 months are gone. And our man Rambo, who once stormed battlefields around the world like an unstoppable force of nature, is now 62 years old. After surviving the brutal events of Afghanistan in Rambo 3, John Rambo has disappeared from the world and settled down in a small village in Thailand. These days, he makes a living by ferrying people across the river and catching fish. When business is slow, he hunts snakes and sells them for extra cash. It's not a glamorous life, but at least he doesn't have to sit through meetings that could have been handled with a single email. As quiet and boring as his life may seem, it's actually the kind of life many people dream about, especially those office workers grinding away every day just to earn a few vacation days each year. One day, a group of missionaries comes looking for Rambo. This time it's not his old commanding officer, Colonel Troutman. These people want him to take them into the Karen region of Myanmar so they can deliver medicine and humanitarian aid to civilians trapped in the conflict. The Karen people have been fighting for their independence for years, but the government military continues to crush them with overwhelming force. Villages are destroyed, innocent civilians are hunted down, and everyday life has become a living nightmare. Having survived more wars than most people could imagine, Rambo understands exactly how cruel war can be. He warns the missionaries that a handful of good-hearted people want to stop a war. His advice is simple: turn around and go home while you still can. As for him, he has had more than enough war for one lifetime. Most of the group starts having second thoughts, but Sarah refuses to give up. That night, during a heavy rainstorm, she finds Rambo and tries to convince him. And honestly, she talks so well she could probably convince guard dogs to switch sides. Eventually, Rambo gives in and agrees to take them into Myanmar. The next morning, everyone sets off. At first, it seems like a routine trip. But this is a Rambo movie, and peace never lasts very long. Halfway through the journey, they run into river pirates. These guys have basically turned extortion into a full-time job. They control the river and demand money from anyone unlucky enough to pass through. Rambo expected this. He tells everyone to stay quiet, shuts off the engine, and lets the boat drift silently downstream. Unfortunately, the pirates spot them anyway and immediately give chase. Rambo tells everyone to keep their heads down. Don't stare at them. Around here, I contact ISNTA conversation starter. It's target selection. Within moments, the pirates catch up. Rambo calmly tells them that he is just an old man with a boat and hands over some money. For a second, it looks like the situation is over. Then the pirates notice Sarah. The moment they see a beautiful woman, their eyes light up like high beams in the middle of the night. They immediately demand that Rambo hand her over. Rambo calmly replies that they can take whatever they want, except her. The next second, he pulls out his pistol and eliminates the entire group with the efficiency of a man crossing items off a grocery list. But somehow, one person still manages to complain. That person is Michael, Sarah's husband. Instead of thanking Rambo for saving everyone's lives, Michael criticizes him for being too violent. At that point, you have to wonder where this guy left his common sense. If Rambo hadn't acted, Sarah would been in serious trouble. Annoyed, Rambo turns the boat around and decides to take everyone home. But Sarah steps in once again and begs him to continue the journey. She awkwardly explains that her husband can be a little naive about how the real world works. The next morning, after reaching their destination, Michael somehow finds a way to complain again. He tells Rambo not to wait for them because they want to be returning on his boat. As if that wasn't enough, he keeps bringing up the pirate incident like he just discovered the secret meaning of life. At this point, Rambo is completely done with him. Without saying another word, he simply turns his boat around and heads home. Meanwhile, Sarah's group reaches a small village. The sight of wounded civilians immediately brings Sarah to tears. Everyone gets to work. Some distribute medicine. Others hand out food and supplies. Some teach from the Bible. And despite being painfully naive at times, Michael is still a qualified doctor and helps treat the injured. Suddenly, a massive explosion shakes the entire village. Government troops have surrounded the area and launched a rocket attack. The assault comes without warning. Nobody has time to prepare. The villagers can only run and hide. Even while their own lives are in danger, Sarah and Michael continue helping wounded civilians escape. The soldiers show absolutely no mercy. They open fire on innocent villagers without hesitation. And it gets even worse. Ground troops move into the village to hunt down anyone who survived the bombardment. Men, women, children, and the elderly. Nobody is spared. The level of cruelty is almost impossible to describe. A group of villagers attempts to escape, but is cut down by gunfire. Sarah survives, but she is eventually captured. Back in Thailand, Rambo is enjoying a peaceful sleep when an older man named Arthur arrives looking for him. Arthur explains that Sarah's group was supposed to return over 10 days ago. Since then, nobody has heard from them. After contacting Karen resistance fighters, he learns that the entire group has been captured. Desperate to save them, Arthur seeks help from the embassy. Unfortunately, the conflict is too dangerous for any official intervention. The only solution offered is a team of mercenaries. Arthur knows Rambo was the one who took the missionaries into Myanmar, so he asks him to guide the rescue team. Without hesitation, Rambo agrees. Even though he left war behind years ago, he can't ignore innocent people who need help. The next morning, Rambo joins the mercenaries and heads back into the war zone. Soon, they are met by 2 Karen resistance fighters who guide them deeper into enemy territory. The fighters explain that the missionaries are being held inside a military prison camp. After scouting the area, the team quickly realizes the camp is heavily guarded. A reckless assault would be suicide. Everything must be carefully planned. As Rambo prepares his weapons, one of the bald mercenaries jokes that he is getting a little old for this kind of work. Maybe it's time to let the younger guys handle it. Rambo doesn't bother answering. He just keeps loading weapons. Guided by the Karen fighters, the team moves toward the camp. Along the way, they pass countless dead bodies scattered across the landscape. The sight sends chills down everyone's spine. Then a military truck suddenly appears. The team hides and watches as innocent civilians are forced out of the vehicle. 2 soldiers walk into a nearby field and begin planting landmines. Then they open fire, forcing terrified civilians to run across the minefield as if human lives were nothing more than a sick form of entertainment. Miraculously, nobody steps on a mine. For a moment, it seems like luck is on their side. Then the soldiers force them to run back through the field again and again, treating human beings like toys in a twisted game. The mercenaries watch in horror, but they cannot risk exposing themselves. Rambo, however, has a different philosophy. If he sees evil, he deals with it. Immediately, he raises his bow and starts firing. Every arrow finds its target. The mercenaries watch in complete disbelief. Their jaws practically hit the floor. But the bald team leader remains calm and reminds everyone that no matter how skilled Rambo is, they cannot engage the enemy. If they do, the entire rescue mission could fall apart. Hearing this, Rambo slowly raises his bow and asks one simple question. "What? You guys scared?" The comment lands directly on the mercenary's pride. And let us be honest, asking a mercenary if he is scared is like asking a chef if he knows how to cook. That challenge is all they need. Within seconds, the entire team is ready to fight alongside Rambo. That night, under a pitch-black sky, the team drives an enemy military truck straight into the prison camp. They move so casually that they look less like infiltrators and more like a delivery crew making a late-night drop-off. The plan is simple. Everyone has exactly 5 minutes to get in and get out. The sniper takes a position on higher ground to provide cover. Everyone else splits up to search for the prisoners. It doesn't take long for Rambo to find the missionaries, but Sarah isn't there. The military has moved her somewhere else. Rambo quickly frees the prisoners and tells them to stay put. Someone will come for them shortly. Meanwhile, enemy soldiers continue patrolling the camp completely unaware that death is already walking among them. Using the distraction, Rambo finally finds Sarah. Unfortunately, she is being held by an armed guard. Rambo could take the shot, but the extraction window has already expired. Outside the camp, the sniper begins quietly eliminating sentries to cover the team's withdrawal. The bald mercenary repeatedly tells Rambo it's time to leave, but Rambo refuses. He tells everyone else to go ahead. He is staying behind to rescue the girl. Eventually, the bald mercenary manages to escort the prisoners to safety. The sniper, however, chooses to stay. In his eyes, if they entered hell together, they leave hell together. There is no way he is abandoning Rambo. Just as Sarah's situation becomes desperate, Rambo finally makes his move. He takes down the guard, so quickly the man barely has time to realize what happened. Rambo immediately frees Sarah and starts leading her out of the camp. Unfortunately, Sarah trips while they're escaping. The nearby patrols instantly spot them and begin the chase. With danger closing in from every direction, the sniper saves them at the last possible second. From hundreds of yards away, he picks off the pursuing soldiers one by one. Thanks to him, all three escape alive. The next morning, the military discovers that the prison camp has been infiltrated. Chaos erupts immediately. Hundreds of soldiers are mobilized along with tracking dogs to hunt down Sarah and the escapees. But bad luck strikes the rescue team. While leading the survivors through the jungle, the bald mercenary accidentally steps on a landmine. The explosion nearly destroys one of his legs. The pursuing soldiers hear the blast and instantly change direction. Now they know exactly where to look. Meanwhile, Rambo, Sarah, and the sniper realize enemy forces are getting dangerously close. Rambo quickly figures out what is happening. The tracking dogs are following Sarah's scent. Without wasting a second, he tears off a piece of Sarah's clothing and attaches it to a landmine trap. Sure enough, the plan works perfectly. The soldiers follow the false trail and walk directly into the ambush. Rambo detonates the mine. The explosion erupts like a 4th of July fireworks show from hell. The blast is so powerful that even Rambo nearly gets caught in it. Eventually, Sarah and the sniper reach the riverbank. But when they look down below, they discover the bald mercenary and his teammates being brutally tortured by enemy troops. Neither of them knows how to help. Then Rambo arrives, and everything changes. He grabs a mounted machine gun and opens fire. At that moment, Rambo stops looking like a man and starts looking like a one-man army. Bullets tear across the battlefield. Enemy soldiers drop one after another. Seizing the opportunity, the bald mercenary and his teammates launch a counterattack. They quickly overpower several soldiers and take their weapons. But there is one major problem. The enemy just keeps coming. Wave after wave of troops flood the battlefield like an endless swarm. To make matters worse, Rambo suddenly runs out of ammunition. The military slowly begins reclaiming the advantage. Just when everything seems lost, reinforcements finally arrive. The Karen resistance fighters enter the battle. At the same time, Rambo finishes reloading and immediately jumps back into the fight. But then a commander aboard a nearby boat starts firing wildly toward the shore. One of the bullets strikes Rambo in the shoulder. Even wounded, he refuses to stay down. He gets back up and continues firing. More enemy soldiers fall. Then he redirects his attention toward the command boat. Combined with a barrage of rockets, launched by the Karen fighters, the vessel is reduced to a floating pile of scrap metal. The commander panics and tries to escape. Unfortunately for him, Rambo doesn't believe in second chances. He draws his bow, takes aim, and releases. The arrow flies straight into its target. The commander collapses instantly. And just like that, the final battle is over. As the survivors prepare to leave, Rambo stands alone on a hillside watching them go. Then he quietly begins his own journey home. Despite its extreme violence, the film presents a brutally honest depiction of war and the suffering it leaves behind. The explosions, the bloodshed, and the chaos all serve one purpose: to show how devastating and meaningless war can truly be. In the end, Rambo picks up his bag and walks down the long road home, a place he may have been searching for his entire life.